Well, I grew up at Harborside, and we had been living in Dansville, New York, Western New York. And my husband was in poultry husbandry, and he had a position out there, but we wanted to come back to Maine. So he thought there was a position available, but the poultry industry was going through a difficult period at that time, and when we got back, we didn't have it. And I really had not wanted to live on a chicken farm, but we were driving a route down along Route 1A, and we saw this nice house at Holmes Street and a chicken farm that was for sale. And so that's how we ended up beginning in the chicken farm. And so I liked the house. Before we left, we could see the river, and we had a beautiful moon came out, and it was really a beautiful view. And I thought, even with the chicken farm, I think I could live there. So we bought it, and it was about 1958. It was in September, and our daughter was born about a month after we moved into the house. We still had boxes around when she came home with me. So that's how we got here. But we had been living in Western New York. Harborside was my family home, and we've been staying with my parents sometimes, and my husband's parents were down in Damariscotta. So this is why we were here. Since 1958, which is a long time. But I wasn't born here, so I'm not native. That you know how that is, Maine. Well, I never could really cook very much with my mother because she was much better than I was and much faster. And so she would end up saying, well, why don't you let me do this myself? And so I figured, well, I thought that we would be marrying, and I thought, oh, I better learn how to cook a little bit. So, and I wanted to go to the University of Maine, and so that's where I ended up. Well, actually, after the children grew up somewhat, I thought it would be interesting to teach, and I went back to school, and then I took elementary classes, and so I could teach in elementary school. And I did a little substituting, but I didn't like that very much because I like to be able to plan and know what I'm doing, and so I ended up, I was substituting one day, and one of the people there said, why don't you teach? And I thought that would be wonderful, and it was third grade, and I liked that age group, so I started teaching in 1968, and I ended up finishing in 1988, so it was around 20 years I was teaching here. I'd also taught home economics in Camden. I did my student teaching there, and then I was hired to be a teacher, so I taught almost the year there. And then I got expecting our first child, and at that time, they weren't too happy to have how different life is today. They weren't too happy to have someone very pregnant teaching, and I suppose especially in the high school. So anyway, it was agreed upon, and I left in the spring vacation. And so I didn't go back to teaching until I was in the grade school. I decided I'd rather do that because I was with our children here in the town. One of the probably outstanding, there were a lot of them. I liked the third grade. They were humorous, and there were funny things they'd say, and so I had a little file in my desk drawer, and something funny would happen. I'd scribble it down and put it in the file. And so now I'm going to forget what you asked me, see. One of the greatest ones was having a little girl, and I believe she was from Vietnam, Luan Nguyen, and I never could quite say her name right. I would try to say it, I'd say, am I right? And she'd say, almost. But she was, I guess, about maybe a week or two before school started, the principal said, "You're going to have a little girl, and she doesn't know any English." And I thought, oh, this will be interesting when you have like 25, 28 people in a classroom. And but it was a very, very wonderful experience. I would work with her after school, and she would learn very quickly, and I would help her with different words, and she was very, very good in math. And so she started out, we had her working with the second grade for a little while in reading until she learned the words, and then by the end of the year, she was working in the third grade and was almost up to third grade level. Brilliant child, and a very rewarding experience. Other things that were fun, I used to like to see the children learn things and see the sparkles in their eyes when they learned something new. And I liked the humor of that age group. Enjoyed the teachers. We had wonderful teachers at the time. And I love science. I love to take them on nature walks. I like the reading groups. Sometimes I could work with, if children already knew some of the things that in reading that we were studying, I would, and you know, rather than have them go over and over things that the other kids still needed, we'd work in different groups. But there were times when I had children and I could get books from the Bangor Library and have them reading on their own. It took a longer time to get the different things because you had to make up a lot more for the individual ones. But instead of have them have to go through what 5 or 10 other children were doing, they could read more on their own, and I like that kind of thing too. Yes, I think we had more freedom to do things with children. You can learn a lot when you're doing a play. You memorize things. You can do different things. That's part of learning. And there were times when we would have plays and put them on for the parents and for other children. You asked about the nature walk. There was a little girl who came back into the classroom with a snake. And I don't really like snakes, but I didn't want her to know that. And she refused to take it outside. And if you know the little girl, you knew you didn't make a big scene, so I had to put it in the terrarium. And it was right next to my friend who taught actually first grade. And I thought they would stay. I thought the snake would stay in the terrarium, but it didn't. And it went in through the wall, and it went into the first grade classroom. And the next morning, I couldn't see the snake in the terrarium, and it ended up under the table of a little reading group. And the kids were saying, "Mrs. Nason, there's a snake under the table." And she wasn't paying any attention. She was an assistant, my friend. And so Sybil, who was not afraid of snakes at all, picked it up, hung onto it, the tail, and came in and said, "Does this belong to you?" And this is the first time I noticed the snake was not in the terrarium. But we got it outside, and it lived a normal life, I think. But even the nature walks, which seemed very, very much fun, could have little problems like that. A little boy who couldn't learn very well said, we were sitting around, and he said, I think I could learn better if we just had school outside. And I thought, I bet you could. I bet you could. It was wonderful. It was a happy time. For me, this was a place. This kind of living was a place for me to enjoy teaching. There are other people that would know that better than me, but I think I the three that are outstanding in my mind was Nom Page, who had a food store, which is where the tea room parking lot, it burned, and it was no longer there, or it isn't there now. But that was nice, and he always was nice to the children, and he gave them animal crackers and things. And then the Rexall, no, I don't know if it was Rexall, but the drugstore was Lawrence Roy and his wife ran that, and they had it in the at first when we were here, they had it in the building of the Oddfellows building. It would be on the right-hand side, but then they moved across the street to where the antique mall area is now. Okay, and there was a hardware store. A Dunham family had a drugstore, no, a hardware store that was quite close to the drugstore. A lot. Paddy Hollow was, actually, I think the name came, there was a mill down at the end of the stream, and I think maybe there were Irish people that maybe lived around that, but we always liked to call it Paddy Hollow, the whole area, Paddy Hollow. Dr. Wagner and Margaret, his wife, were they were right across the street from me. But there were a lot of young children. The Wagners had 5 at the time, and then they had 2 more later, so there were 7. Another family, the Sawyers, had 4 children, and we had 2. There was just, it was a wonderful place to live. The Wagners, Dr. Wagner liked caroling, so we would get together on Sunday nights during the December time and sing Christmas carols. Wag we called him Wag. He didn't really like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He didn't like that kind of music, so he refused to sing some of those more recent ones. But they opened their house at Christmas Eve, and I'm thinking of 5 and then 7 children, and they could have their playroom able to have people come in and share their Christmas night with them. We had a parade and fair. The children decorated their bicycles, trikes, and there were older children too, and they could do some of the things that, like they had a fair, and the older kids would have booths of different things that we'd have. But we'd parade down around and go up to the Sawyer field, and the children loved it, really. So Teddy Weston and Abby Stover did a lot. I think either her husband or a father maybe was a captain, and so she did a lot, and she has pictures and information on the sea captains, and some of those things I think are really treasures. The Wagner children did a Penobscot View Press, which was very interesting. It was each week they would go around and get information, and then they'd write it down, and it would be delivered to our homes. And so, and I think someone has tried to put those, because they were printed on a what did you call it, that purple print that does disappear after a while. So a lady, I believe, was having those protected. She was, what digitizing them or something, so that she was making it available so that hopefully they wouldn't disappear. And I think there was also newspapers that are from that time, which is it's a wonderful way to remember what happened in the town. That was, we were very close to selling it, and we didn't really want to, but it was necessary because of the bad situation with the poultry industry. And we had it, we were in 5 days from selling it, changing hands. And little Debbie, our daughter, who was a hot ticket, was with me in the car. Our son was in school. But we were driving out to go somewhere, and she said, "I see smoke." And I looked, and sure enough, there was smoke coming out of one of the windows. Well, they were going to be having broilers in there, and then the broilers were on the way to the building, but they hadn't arrived. And the people that were going to be buying the place were headed, it was an agreement that they would get it set up. And they had little heating stoves for the little chickens, and they were lighting those. And evidently one of them got, the fuel got out into the shavings, and it was a huge fire. And when I called quickly, and they came up, but the hydrant that was near our house didn't have any water in it at all. And so they had to go and get water from some other place to bring it. Well, and the fire was so fast. And I have pictures of it so that we can put it in with. So many people say they don't remember it being a chicken farm there, but it was we had several thousand chickens. And so we ended up, it was still ours. And so we gradually got it cleaned up. I don't know how far to go on this, but had it cleaned up, and we had a chicken farm, and we had different different kinds of birds. We began with a breeder flock, and that was very expensive. And as I said, the poultry business was going out of business. It was going defunct in the area. So my husband had work outside, and he hired people that would come in and to work in the chicken farm, and they had different people that would come in and bring flocks in, and this particular family that were going to buy it wanted to have broilers, which I don't remember too much about. I really wasn't my favorite thing, but our son was just a little guy, and he would go down with his father when we had this breeder flock, and the roosters would, I didn't want to go anywhere near, because the roosters come in and they have to show that they're the king of the area. And so, but Glenn was so small that they didn't bother him at all, and he could walk around in his little suit just like his father, and it was really kind of cute, but I didn't want any part of being there. Sybil was a first grade teacher, but she was right next to my room. She's the one that had the snake and brought it back. Yes, we had a fun time. Joe Watson was a principal, and he was terrified of lice. And he would tell us, you need to, I've got a poem here that I could read to you. But he would tell us, the teachers, check the kids. But then he'd get in his office, or he'd stay away from the kids in the hall. And Sybil said to me, it was Christmas, near Christmas time. She said, I'm going to cut a little curl off and put a little nit It looks like a, what do you call these little things? And she said, and I'll put it in a box, and you write a poem, and we'll present it to them for the party that we had. And it was hilarious. And this is called lousing. I itch, said Sal to Tom, but not as bad as Brother John. Teacher hears this, and she starts. She checks Sal's hair between the parts. As she pulls hairs and gives a flick, sure enough, those specks do stick. Teacher itches, then she scratches, first all over, then in patches, settles finally on her head, thinks she sees lice in her bed, pours vinegar over head and house, till she's sure there's not a louse. Then teacher thinks of her fine chief, telling her of his belief. You must check kids' heads quite often. Thus our problem you will soften. He thinks he's safe between four walls. He keeps his distance in the halls. She smiles a smile inside herself, thinks, I'll play a little elf. First cut off infected locks, then I put them in a box. He'll not suspect till it's too late, and then he'll have we others' fate. Now he itches and he scratches, first all over, then in patches, settles down right on his head, thinks he sees lice in his bed. He'll no doubt infect the town, 'cause he really gets around. Goes to all those important meetings, giving smiles and happy greetings. All will itch and all will scratch. The itch will settle in one patch. They'll never know all came from Sal while talking to her little pal. This was in Christmas of 1981, and he took it very well, and it was fun.